A guttural snarl ripped through the air, followed by Brenda's scream. My blood ran cold. Brenda. I roared, throwing open the front door and sprinting onto the porch. Our golden retriever, Buttercup, lay cowering beneath the porch swing, whimpering. Two men in dark blue uniforms emblazoned with community security held Brenda by the arms. A German shepherd, teeth bared, strained against a leash held by a third officer. "It's okay, girl, it's okay," Brenda sobbed, her voice trembling. Her eyes, wide with terror, met mine. They said Buttercup bit someone. Rage, white-hot and blinding, surged through me. Bit someone? I spat, rounding on the officers. That dog wouldn't hurt a fly. What the hell is going on here? The officer with the dog, a hulking man with a crew cut and a face like granite, sneered. "Control your animal, sir. We received a report of a vicious dog bite on HOA property. Your dog matches the description." Description. I choked back a laugh, incredulous. "She's a golden retriever. You think she's the only one in the neighborhood?" "Sir," Granite Face barked, his voice laced with an unmistakable threat. "We're just doing our job. Now, do you have the dog's papers, or are we going to have a problem?" I fumbled for my wallet, my hands shaking with anger. This was absurd. A nightmare. I pulled out Buttercup's registration and vaccination records, slapping them into Granite Face's hand. He barely glanced at them. "We'll need to see some ID," he said, his gaze unwavering. As I reached for my driver's license, a voice, calm and authoritative, cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here, officers?" We all turned to see a woman in a crisp pantsuit striding towards us, her expression a mask of controlled fury. Even from a distance, her name tag glinted in the afternoon sun. Karen, HOA president. Granite Face's face, however, morphed into something resembling relief. He snapped to attention. "Mrs. Peterson, we were just..." His words died in his throat as Karen, eyes fixed on me, went white as a sheet. Her carefully crafted composure crumbled like a sandcastle in a storm. "David?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. My breath hitched. This entire surreal situation just took a nosedive into the twilight zone. "Karen, Karen." I echoed, my voice a mix of confusion and disbelief. The blood drained from Karen's face, leaving her looking like she'd seen a ghost. Or rather, her ghost. The Karen I knew, the one who terrorized the neighborhood with her nitpicky rules and venomous complaints, was gone. In her place stood a woman on the verge of a breakdown. "David," she breathed again, her eyes darting between me and the officers flanking her. What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I sputtered, gesturing to Brenda and the leashed-up German shepherd. "I live here, Karen. This is my wife, Brenda. Remember, you sent us a passive-aggressive welcome basket full of HOA pamphlets when we moved in." A flicker of something akin to panic crossed Karen's face. She glanced at the officers, who were now shifting uncomfortably, clearly picking up on the weird vibes. "Sir," Granite Face cleared his throat, his tone losing its previous edge. "Perhaps we could just have your ID and—" "He doesn't need to show you anything," Karen snapped, her voice regaining some of its trademark sharpness, but directed at the officer this time. The effect was startling. Granite Face visibly cowered. "This is a misunderstanding. A mistake. I'll handle this personally." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The one holding the dog, a younger guy with nervous eyes, seemed particularly relieved. Karen turned her attention back to me, her demeanor softening a fraction, but the fear in her eyes remained. "David," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "this isn't the place to talk. Can you please come inside? We need to talk. It's important." She turned and, without another word, marched back towards her own house across the street, leaving the bewildered officers and an even more bewildered me in her wake. Brenda grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. David, what's going on? Who is that woman? Her fear was palpable, but there was a fire in her eyes now, the protective instincts of a wife defending her territory. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. I have absolutely no idea what's going on, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. But something tells me we're about to find out. Karen stood on her doorstep, an island of perfectly manicured lawns separating us. She looked fragile, a far cry from the iron-fisted HOA dictator we knew her as. The officers, dismissed with a wave of her hand, were already climbing back into their patrol car, the German shepherd disappearing into the back with a whimper. Granite Face lingered for a moment, shooting me a look that could only be described as apologetic, before climbing into the driver's seat and slowly pulling away. I turned to Brenda, 1,000 questions swirling in my head. Wait inside, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Let me see what she wants. It's probably about the gutters again. Brenda hesitated, her gaze flickering back to Karen, who now stood rigidly on her porch, arms crossed, a picture of forced composure. I could practically hear her teeth grinding from across the street. David, Brenda said, her voice low, be careful. Something's not right about this. I leaned down and kissed her forehead, ignoring the prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Always am, I murmured, before turning and heading across the street, my unease growing with every step. This had to be about something more than a noise complaint or unmowed grass. This was personal, and I had a sinking feeling it was about to get a whole lot worse. As I stepped onto Karen's pristine porch, the door swung open before I could even lift my hand to knock. Karen stood there, her face pale, her eyes filled with a desperate plea. David, she whispered, you can't tell anyone. Please. Can't tell anyone what? I asked, my voice echoing in the sterile, overly decorated foyer of Karen's McMansion. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and anxiety. Karen closed the door behind me, her movements jerky and uncoordinated, a stark contrast to her usual icy composure. She looked like a completely different person, vulnerable, scared even. David, please, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Just promise me you won't tell anyone about this. About me. I stared at her, utterly bewildered. About you? Karen, you just sixed the HOA rent-a-cops on my wife with a German shepherd. I think the time for secrets is long gone. No, you don't understand, she insisted, wringing her hands. You don't know the half of it. If anyone finds out, if he finds out I'm here, I don't know what I'll do. She collapsed onto a meticulously upholstered chaise lounge, burying her face in her hands. I stood there, a silent observer to her meltdown. Who was this woman, and what had she done with the real HOA Karen? Karen. I tried again, my voice softening. You're starting to freak me out here. Just tell me what's going on. Who is he? Karen lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a terror I'd never seen in another human being, let alone the woman who ruled our neighborhood with an iron fist and a copy of the HOA bylaws. He's my husband, she whispered, her voice barely audible. And he's the chief of police. My jaw dropped. The chief of police. I blurted out, my voice echoing Karen's own disbelief. You're married to the chief of police. Karen nodded miserably, her gaze fixed on the floor. John Peterson. He isn't who you think he is, David. He's dangerous. Controlling. I had to get away. The pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to fall into place, albeit in a bizarre, nightmarish pattern. The overly aggressive HOA security, Karen's uncharacteristic fear, the hushed whispers, the palpable terror in her eyes when she mentioned her husband. It all pointed to something dark and sinister lurking beneath the surface of our carefully manicured community. But why? I asked, my confusion outweighing my shock. Why come here? Why this elaborate charade? Karen finally met my gaze, her eyes pleading for understanding. He controls everything, David. Every aspect of my life. My money, my friends, my family. I couldn't just leave asterisk. He would have found me. So I disappeared. She took a shaky breath, her carefully constructed facade crumbling a little more with each passing moment. I changed my name, dyed my hair, even got contacts, she confessed, gesturing vaguely at her face. I thought if I could just blend in, become invisible, he would never find me. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Irony of ironies, I ended up the president of the HOA, the one calling the shots, enforcing the rules. It was almost freeing, for a while. But then you saw me, I said, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. And all this, the security, the dog, it was just a panicked reaction. You thought I would recognize you, and... Karen nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and fear. I panicked. You're the spitting image of your father, David. For a moment, I thought John had sent you to find me. My father, Chief Thompson, a pillar of the community, respected by everyone, feared by some. The man I hadn't seen or spoken to in nearly a decade. The man whose shadow I'd been trying to escape my entire life. And now, I was face to face with the woman who was terrified of him, the woman who claimed to be his wife. My father, I began, my voice a gravelly whisper. The weight of the past, of our strained relationship, suddenly felt heavier than ever. He doesn't know about you, Vazee, I asked, already knowing the answer. Karen shook her head, her body trembling. No, he has no idea. And I need to keep it that way. David, please, she begged, her voice cracking. You can't tell them you've seen me. You can't tell anyone. The room seemed to shrink around me, the air growing thick with her desperation. I was caught in a web of secrets, lies, and fear, and the spider at the center of it all was the very man who had sworn to protect and serve. My own father. My mind reeled. My father, the chief of police, living a lie. Karen, the neighborhood tyrant, a terrified wife in hiding. It was too much to process. All I could focus on was the fear etched on Karen's face, the fear that mirrored my own buried anxieties about my father. Karen, I said, my voice strained, I haven't spoken to my father in years. We don't have the best relationship. She looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. You haven't told him you're here, in town. I shook my head. No, he doesn't even know I exist anymore. As far as he's concerned, I'm halfway across the world, still chasing some foolish dream. A choked sob escaped Karen's lips, and she covered her face with her hands. I wanted to offer her comfort, but what comfort could I possibly give? I was just starting to understand the depths of her despair. He hurts me, David, she whispered, her voice muffled by her hands. He controls me. I had to get away. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about control, about some twisted need for power. This was about abuse. My father, the man who had sworn to protect the innocent, was hurting his wife, the woman he supposedly loved. The room seemed to spin, the scent of lilies suddenly suffocating. I stumbled back, bracing myself against a wall adorned with framed pictures of smiling couples, manicured lawns, and was that my father, arm in arm, with a woman who was definitely not Karen. He's going to hurt you, Karen sobbed. If he finds you here, with me, he'll hurt you both. Her words were a punch to the gut. Fear, cold and sharp, cut through my confusion. My father was a dangerous man, I knew that. But to hurt his own son, was he capable of that? The world tilted on its axis. My own father, a threat? The idea seemed impossible, ludicrous even. But Karen's terror was real, raw, and deep down, buried under years of resentment and forced separation, a chilling certainty took root. He was capable of anything. "He won't find you," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The instinct to protect, to shield her from the monster she feared, was visceral, primal. It surprised me. "I won't let him." A flicker of hope, fragile as a butterfly's wing, sparked in Karen's tear-filled eyes. "But what about the HOA? What about the security?" "Gone," I stated, already planning. "I'll handle them. We both know those rent-a-cops are more scared of you than anyone." A few well-placed calls. I trailed off, a new, bolder plan forming in my mind. I wouldn't just protect Karen. I would expose my father, bring his carefully constructed world crashing down around him. This charade, this carefully curated life built on lies and fear, would end. "Karen," I said, meeting her gaze with newfound steel in my own eyes, "I'm going to help you. I promise. But you need to trust me." She stared at me, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment, the terrified woman disappeared, replaced by a glimmer of the steely resolve I'd seen in the HOA Karen. I do trust you, David," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I think you're my only hope." A slow smile spread across my face, cold and dangerous. "Good," I said, the years of anger, resentment, and fear coalescing into a steely determination. "Because your husband is about to meet the son he never knew he had. And trust me, Karen, he's not going to like what he sees."